And we are live. We are live. Did you know that for many students, the greatest barrier to higher education isn't aptitude, but inherited circumstance? Today, we're sharing the ultimate proof that you can reset your starting line. Welcome back to Leadership Lives. Our guest, Debra Carlson, went from a sixth generation welfare recipient raised in foster homes to a university vice president. She's here to share the practical mindset shifts and strategies that made that possible. Debra is a former dean, professor, and university vice president, and an expert US university admissions coach, and also a canoeist. I've just discovered that Debra canoed for 12,000 kilometers, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. She brings decades of high-level academic experience grounded in a powerful personal journey through foster care, group homes, and as a first-generation college student. So we often talk about external challenges in education on this podcast, but today we focus on the internal resilience required to overcome systemic generational barriers. Debra, your path is the ultimate lesson in professional and emotional resilience. And today, our challenge for the two of us today is to answer the question, how does a person navigate systems like the welfare and foster care system that often trap people in cycles, and find the tools to transform that experience into professional power? But before we dive into the core of Debra's story, remember that subscribing to Leadership Lives and activating the notification bell is an investment in your personal, professional, ethical growth as a leader in the global education space. So let's begin. So Debra, given your start, a sixth generation welfare family raised in foster care and group homes, what was the single most challenging internal barrier you faced in seeking higher education, and how did you use that vulnerability to find professional confidence?
There were two big vulnerabilities. One was the lack of knowledge. My mother graduated from high school and my father did not. He was an alcoholic and she was a mentally ill woman who abused her prescription medication and went from doctor to doctor. And so I knew nothing about colleges and universities, what the word ever meant, and financial vulnerability. My mother did not work. My father was a factory worker, and we received welfare to support the family of 7 children that they gave birth to. And one of the things I learned about college, I learned about through reading books. To escape the world that I lived in, I read. They had bookmobiles back in the day. I went to the library, I checked out books, and I read about this magical place called college. And I remembered the novel where a young girl packed her trunk and rode the train to Boston and went on study abroad to Switzerland. And I had no idea what that meant, but it became my dream through reading. And then in terms of financial barriers, I learned over the years that there was money for poor people, and there still is money for economically disadvantaged people in the form of financial aid. And I had excellent mentors and supporters that saw potential in me, that encouraged me and said, don't let the price tag scare you. There are people out there who want to help disadvantaged people, and we will access every potential source of revenue that there is. And they taught me how to explore it, and for lack of a better term, exploit it, take advantage of it, use it for the good purpose for which it was intended.
Who were these people? I mean, how can, if somebody watching this it wants to go to university and has always thought that it was out of their reach, I mean, we're talking about the US context here, no? But
Yes.
how did you find these people? Who were these people? I mean, how can somebody reach out to people like this?
Many families who are disadvantaged or in very dire circumstances may have a social worker assigned to them. We had a social worker who worked with our family, and she, of course, she had a college education, and she came and checked on us. And so she was very beneficial in telling me I was smart, that that I could make a difference in the world, that if and when the situation with my biological parents became too difficult, to let her know, because they had already extracted, my oldest sister had moved out of the home, and my next two sisters had been extracted because one was a juvenile delinquent and the other was a perpetual runaway, and they saw problems and pulled them out of the family, which left four of us behind. And we were being physically abused and emotionally abused. And then my first foster parents were Peace Corps volunteers, and one was a high school teacher and both were college educated, and they were amazing people, you know, telling me, look, if for some reason the system intervenes and sends you back home, because that's the goal of foster care, to reunite the family, to fix it and reunite the children with their biological parents. If something goes wrong, we're here. We'll help you get out. You can call us. Call us kind of became my tagline. Call anybody. My high school math teacher, who eventually became my foster mother, intervened, and through our personal relationship, living in the group home run by the Roman Catholic Church, the Sisters of Good Shepherd in St. Paul, Minnesota. The nun was very open-minded, very liberal, very supportive of young, it was a group home for girls, obviously, very supportive of young women getting educated and helping us keep, you know, at 18, you're released from the system, and she wanted us prepared to have a place to go. And so a couple of the philosophies I learned from these different people, and also my exchange parents. I spent a year as an exchange student in Oaxaca, Mexico, with a magnificent family, again, with seven kids, 7 daughters, and I was their 8th. And I got to see a big, beautiful, loving family. But there were a couple of phrases I adopted. One was call for help. Call the anonymous lines, call the self-help lines, Google help in my city for this. Back then it was the yellow pages. Today our source would be artificial intelligence or the internet to get access to these free resources. And I would call and get phone counseling. The other tagline that I kind of adopted was never, ever reject yourself. Make them reject you. Apply. The worst thing they'll do is say no. They won't shoot you. They won't. Nowadays, I tell my students, they won't shoot you. They won't put your name on the internet. You'll get a letter of rejection, or someone will tell you no. But never assume you're going to hear no, and don't reject yourself.
Yeah, very useful advice. Very useful advice. And how did you come into contact with the exchange family in Oaxaca? Was that through your high school?
You know, life is incredible. Yes and no. Exchange programs are, the host families are typically very kind and wonderful and amazing people. And my first set of foster parents, who were the Peace Corps volunteers, the mother had been an exchange student in high school and went to Finland. And then oddly enough, I got, and reading the story about the young lady who went to Switzerland for study abroad, going to a foreign country, whatever that meant, was a dream I had. And when I got to high school, my high school math teacher in grade 9 was also the advisor to a club called AFS, and they're all over Facebook at the moment. This is one of their anniversary years. And AFS does international exchanges. And she had been a host mother to foreign students, and none of her biological children had wanted to go. And I joined the club and got active with the international students. And my math teacher, who subsequently became my foster mother, said, "Why don't you apply?" And I said, "I have no money. I can't afford it." And she said, "They give scholarships, try. Let's have you apply." And so I applied. I went through a rigorous interview process. I went to an orientation camp and then made the final selection. And AFS, the way they work is they match you to a family, not to a country. So I couldn't say I wanted to go to Japan. I mean, I really wanted to go to some place I thought would be really different. Japan, Indonesia, China. And I thought Mexico is so, when I heard I was going to Mexico, I was a little sad because I thought it's so close to North America, to the United States of America. I'm very sensitive about what we call North America because I live in Mexico now, and in high school I learned all about
yes.
the
You've returned. You've returned to the city where you stayed with that host family.
Yes.
Years later.
And what I discovered when I came to Oaxaca, Mexico, was it is not North America South. It is totally unique. It is a little touched by North American culture, but we have this beautiful blend of traditional Oaxacan culture and little pieces of we have one Starbucks, 2 McDonald's, 1 Home Depot, 2 Office Depots, but it's still traditional clothing, traditional food, the traditional artisans. It's the most amazing place to get to live in the world. And so I've come full circle and come back and still have my Mexican exchange family. And I call my mama, and my sisters are my sisters. And so being an exchange student made an incredible difference in my life and opened my world and introduced me to a culture that I embraced. I was someone who needed and wanted a real family. And I discovered that through all my foster families, I rarely call them my foster families, I call them my families. Through all my families, I had the world's biggest family. And I raised my children saying, the world is our family and we have to travel to go meet the relatives. And so we have gone to as many countries as financially possible to know the cultures and to ignite that same passion in my children, to love and embrace other people and other cultures, and consider other people your family members. They may be your adopted family members, but the family we love most is the family often that we choose, as opposed to the one that we were born into.
Yes, very, very true. Very, very true. I've got some killer facts here. It says here that only approximately 11% of students from the lowest socioeconomic quartile in the US earn a bachelor's degree by the age of 24, highlighting the magnitude of your achievement, no? Are these figures correct? I mean, does that tally with your,
Yes. For instance, I lived in the group home with 5 other young women, and none of them went to college. None of them even considered community college. Even with me saying, I'm going and there's a college fair at the high school, let's all go together. They weren't interested. Their parents they were first generation. Well, their parents had not gone to college or university either. Many of them did not understand the value of it. For example, when I went to law school, and I told my biological parents that after college I was going to law school, my parents were so uneducated. They said, well, if you knew you wanted to be a lawyer, why didn't you just go to law school in the first place? And so there is that lack of knowledge of what college is and what doors it can open. Even if there's the knowledge, there's the lack of information being broadly spread about financial aid and how much is available for truly economically disadvantaged people, and that there is no shame or reason to be embarrassed in applying for it, and that there's no shame in being a foster child or being on welfare, and that there are systems and processes in place to help us and to help us change and transform our lives if we just take that first step or accept that first offer of assistance and welcome it. There are many television.
Know how to navigate it as well, no?
Exactly. And there are lots of movies and TV shows and news reports about the negative things about foster care or social services and where it has failed. And yes, that occurs and that happens, and it happens in everything in life. But the vast majority of people who decide to become foster parents or social workers are kind-hearted, loving people who want to make a difference in the world and bring everyone up a level or a notch or two and help them be successful.
Yes. Yeah, very true. I mean, they're certainly not doing it for the money.
Oh, absolutely not.
So the motivation, it comes from somewhere else. Yeah, that's something that makes sense.
It comes from within. It can come from a small experience, a small act of community service or charity, or it can come from a bigger world experience, like going abroad and doing the Peace Corps and seeing the conditions in the villages and the pueblos that they lived and worked in, and saying, we have these problems back home in our own country, and when we go home, we need to do something. And that's how my husband who's Oaxacan, and we live in Oaxaca, that's how we came to start our not-for-profit foundation.
Yes, because of that desire to give something back, no?
Well, it came out of coronavirus, believe it or not. We were building little guest houses on our property for his retirement plan, and coronavirus hit, and the children had to go to school online. And so we opened a couple of the bungalows that were, they were just concrete floors, but we had plastic tables that we could, and chairs that we could set up in there. And we invited the disadvantaged children to come and use our internet for free, use our computers for free. We printed their papers. We socially distanced them and we masked them. And the big kids tutored the little kids and we tutored the big kids. And at the end of coronavirus, we looked at each other and we said, we're not wealthy people. But here we have so much more than these children in our area, Pueblo, that live in lamina huts and don't have computers, and they have to pay for every minute of internet service that they had, that we said, we need to start a foundation. We need to help the economically disadvantaged families in the area in any way we can. We teach English classes, we raise money. We try to sponsor youth and pay their tuition or half of their tuition to university, which is much less expensive here than it is in the United States. And as well as my husband's very interested in art. And so we're very invested in supporting emerging Oaxacan artists and helping them not only get visibility in Oaxaca, but on the international stage as well. The people of Oaxaca are just salt of the earth, amazing. And that's not to say that the people of North America, of Los Angeles, of Chicago, throughout the United States aren't salt of the earth either. They need the same kind of support and help that we're giving to the people here in Oaxaca. And I work with an organization in the United States to help them help people both in the United States as well as in Uganda. Helping people is very important to both me and my husband.
I'm reading, I have another killer fact here. It says that students with formal mentors are 35% more likely to enroll in a university and 25% more likely to be promoted professionally. I mean, I know that the mentors that I've had in my life have been and still are incredibly important for me. I think, and you mentioned the mentors in your life, how can younger people reach out and identify these mentors and form that, and maybe ask the person to mentor them? I mean, how does that work for somebody who hasn't been, because I think in my case, I was taken under the wing of a number of different people. There's about 6 people I can think of in my, during my life who have done that, and not family members. I love my family, but mentors are something else, right? How can a person who has never had a mentor and, maybe doesn't have that person who's inviting them in, how can you find a person like that and ask them to be your mentor?
And that's a perfect question for me, because I changed schools: kindergarten first, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 12th grades. And unlike college, where people are standing there to orient you and welcome you and want to be your friend, when you change schools like that, everybody has their clique, their social group.
Yeah.
And so one thing I learned was that everyone is nervous inside. We're all every person on the earth. I don't care who you are, how wealthy you are, how educated you are. We're all nervous and have anxiety inside of, will I be liked? Will I be successful? Will I be welcomed? And once I figured that out, changing schools, I learned to just step in and say, hi, I'm Deb, I'm new. Can you help me? And or will you be my friend, or will you have lunch with me? And they were thrilled, because they were just as nervous about having friends. Yeah. And telling people I needed help, that I didn't know how to do math. And so as early as elementary school, I was going to my teachers and saying, can I come after school and get help? Can I come early tomorrow and get help? Because somehow I knew, and that's something I really want to convey to parents, and if there are any young people watching, that teaching your children, it's okay to not know the answer, and it's wonderful to ask for help, and that these people went into their professions to provide help. So asking just for plain old fashioned help. That's how my foster mother my math teacher became my foster mother. I had gotten very advanced in math, and somehow I tested into a higher level math where I knew enough to pass the course, but not enough to get an A. And I was really struggling. And I went to her and said, I'm really struggling. I changed schools and they put me in your class. I'm a sophomore with the juniors. I need extra help. How can I get it? And some days she would come early, some days she would stay late. And one day I commented to her, I can't stay late tomorrow because it's my night to cook at the dinner at the group home. So could I meet you early tomorrow morning? And she said, why are you in a group home? What is this about? Explain this to me. And unbeknownst to me, I knew there was a high school social worker, and I had contact with her. They actually had one physically located in the high school because of the part of the city we lived in. And she went to the high school social worker and said, this young woman has potential. I want to, my kids are grown up. I want to take her in. I want to make certain she gets support. And it was because I went to her and asked for help, and I opened my vulnerabilities to her, that my dad was an alcoholic, that my mom was a mentally ill prescription drug abuser, and that I was living in a group home operated by a nun. And those were very difficult things in junior high and high school to share with colleagues, to share with teachers. But when I opened up and I shared what I was going through, I didn't experience regret. There was no discrimination. No one was appalled. All people wanted to do was help me. So sharing that you need help, that you're open to it, and being vulnerable enough to share your story was with other people. Going off to college, moving into my dormitory with two young women, one whose dad was a lawyer and a multimillionaire, and one who came from a very solidly upper middle class family. And here was the foster kid. And one of the things I had to warn them is, I have a crazy mother, and she may call one day and say terribly inappropriate, bizarre things to you. And I don't want you to be shocked and stunned. And I had to take control of the situation and just be comfortable sharing my story. And over the years, as I shared my story, starting as early as junior high and elementary school, I never once experienced discrimination or hatred or anything but compassion and empathy and the desire to help. There were a couple of times where people would say to their children, "I don't want you hanging out with her. She's a foster kid." And that was because they didn't know, the stereotype of a foster kid
ignorant.
is ignorant, and that they might be violent, or they might be a thief, or they might have weapons or rob stores. And as people got to understand, no, foster kids and other economically disadvantaged or situationally disadvantaged kids just need a mentor. They need a grown-up, an older person that they respect, admire, who takes them under, who reaches out to them, or who accepts and recognizes their needs and tries to help meet them. People donated clothes, winter clothing to help me. People donated, and this was long before now it's a popular charitable act for people to do. But back when I was a little child, it wasn't. People would donate money to the cafeteria to pay for my lunch, my hot lunch. And nowadays that's a common thing to do. And I encourage people to do that. Go check with your local high schools, junior highs, elementary school students. Are there kids who can't afford lunch and can contribute $5, $10, $15? Every dollar helps. And those are the kind of mentors and experiences that help me realize it's safe to share my story. And many people began to become impressed by the story and say, this is a person we should hire. They have overcome incredible obstacles, and they have a lot to share with the world and with whatever population they're working with. And that's how I wound up transitioning from being a lawyer to being a higher ed administrator and a dean of students. And I considered the college pop community my family, and I took care of those students as well as I would take care of my own students, and cared about them as much as my own children, to make certain that that no student was left behind, as cliche-ish as that may sound.
No, but yes, that's super important. A lot of them are left behind, and
Yes.
they don't have to be, I'm just thinking, you're making me think, how can, because it's not only younger people, I think it's all of us, but especially, in this context, is how can younger people find the courage to ask for help? Because it's not easy on one hand, and how can they identify people who would be a safe person to ask for, because I think most people are good people in this world, but not everybody. I mean, you mentioned, so a teacher or a social worker is a good bet, let's say. Are there other like characteristics or a profile? I mean, you were obviously very good at identifying people who would help you and would not abuse you.
Well, I developed that skill by accident. Our family was assigned a social worker, but she was focused on the unclean living conditions that we were situated in, and on the two of the three older children who were runaways and one who was a delinquent, and not so much on the other four of us. And somehow I heard about helplines, these anonymous helplines.
Right.
There were posters hanging up, and And I saw one day and I thought, I'm just going to call and talk to this person. They can't see me. They won't know my name. We didn't have caller ID back then. And I called and talked to an anonymous person and said, you know, what can I do? My mother is crazy and she's beating us. And she would drag my sister by the hair down the basement stairs and beat her with a belt. And I knew my turn was coming, that it was just a matter of age. And as children started exiting the house, her focus became on the younger children. And so talking to strangers on helplines who gave me, anonymous strangers on helplines who gave me advice about who to see and talk to. The principal seemed like a safe person at the elementary school. And so I talked with him. And then teachers, oftentimes we could tell by the teacher's behavior who were the kind and warm and welcoming ones, how they smiled, how they disciplined students, how they changed students' behavior. For example, there was one teacher at my elementary school who used to say he had his size 14 boots, and you'd get the 14er if you didn't behave. So he was not someone I was going to open up and talk to. But for instance, a little group of us were misbehaving in music class. We sat in the back and we goofed around, and it was the 60s, and Hair, the musical, had come out, and there's the part of the musical Hair where they sing, "Oh, say can you see my eyes if you can, then my hair's too short." And every time we sang the Star Spangled Banner, we would turn it into Hair. And the teacher was just so frustrated with us, but she handled it in such an amazing way. She pulled the three of us out of a classroom and sat us down in an empty classroom. And she talked with us and said, you know, why are you doing this? What, you know, you're smart, nice young ladies, you're good people. Why do you do this every time we sing the Star Spangled? And we were working on it. So it was happening every day in music class, if you can imagine.
And it's an important song. If you're growing up in the US, it's an important song. You don't turn it into Hair.
Yeah.
Or you couldn't anyway.
And so she gave us each an instrument. She gave me a tambourine. She gave somebody else a little drum to pound on, and somebody else some maracas. I think they're called maracos or maracas.
Maracas, yeah.
And put us to work and made us feel important. And so when I was having a rough time at home and winter was coming and we didn't have boots and we didn't have mittens or coats, you know, I felt I could open up to her and say, you know, I don't want to come to school tomorrow. There's going to be a snowstorm and I don't have the clothes. And so she networked with the other teachers to collect used clothing that their children had outgrown and donated it to our family. And the elementary school made our family kind of the cause célèbre among the teachers. They gifted us a turkey for Thanksgiving one year, and the same year they gifted us turkey for Christmas dinner. And so reading the signals, and then of course, you know, being conscious, as we all are today, of that there are inappropriate people who know how to use nice signals to their advantage, and just being aware, like when the teacher took us to the other room, even though we weren't in an era where abuse was as prevalent as it is today, whether subconsciously or consciously, she'd made the decision, take three together, not just one. And so I felt safe. You know, a teacher is not going to abuse three people simultaneously or hurt three people simultaneously.
And
so
reading the vibe,
yes,
the vibe as well, maybe the emotional resonance. Yeah.
And I think children who have been abused or are in a situation for the potential for abuse, we develop like a sixth sense or awareness of, okay, I need to make sure I'm protecting myself and take care of myself. Like the first day I went into foster care, I was scared to death. I was petrified. I didn't, because first they put you in what they call a receiving home, where you live until they find you a foster home, because they can't produce the right family for you immediately. So there are people who will have 5 or 6 kids in their home at a time, who are all, like we had a giant bedroom with 3 sets of bunk beds and 6 girls and a nice family. And they were, the state was looking for foster families for all 6 of us, because you want a good match too. You just don't want to throw a child in with anybody. If it's not a good match, there might be clashes. And so the first day I got in the car with the social worker, with my little teeny tiny paper bag with a couple pieces of clothing and my school books, I was petrified to death. But I knew the social worker was there to take care of me. And when we got to the receiving home and she introduced me to the parents and asked the parents questions in front of me, so I could learn about their background and why they did this kind of work and get more comfortable with just moving cold into their house with the mom and the dad, their 2 biological children, and then the other 5 kids or young girls who were waiting for foster homes. It really helped calm me and settle my nerves. And then the thought, that there is always safety in numbers, that with 6 teenage girls in the house, there were, and all of us sharing one giant room, we had a safety net there amongst us.
Now, you've mentioned your pro bono work, and it's something that I do a little bit of as well. What are the benefits of giving back? I mean, obviously there are benefits to the community, but what are the benefits? What have you learned from giving back like this?
Well, I think of it as paying forward. I mean, the joy it gives me. Like, we're sponsoring a young lady. We have been for many years. We helped her get through middle school and high school, and we're paying for half of her university tuition. And the joy it gives us when she has successful results on an exam, or when she goes, right now she's just 20 years old, and she is aunt to a 15-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 2-year-old. So her sister had children very, very young. And when we see her giving back, helping educate her 2 nephews and her niece, and that she's helped make, she understands that if you help others, it makes a difference, not only for them, but for people in the future. And we see her paying it forward to other people and raising money, helping raise money for good causes through her university. We get a lot of joy out of working with the elementary school kids and helping them learn English, because here they don't start English until junior high. And English is vital for their success. And so getting them, and the earlier you start, the easier it is for them to learn. And so seeing them, and we try to do teaching through creative activities, playing soccer, for some formal teaching, some fun English, Spanish children's books, and then soccer and Legos, and teaching physics concepts through Legos in English, and not worrying about the grammar, but building the vocabulary like you do with a newborn baby. You don't start teaching them, correcting their grammar. You teach them the word water, or the word Legos, or the word house. And the joy is overwhelming. And I feel that I owe the world an incredible debt. Going from a welfare recipient, ashamed to bring people home, afraid of my parents, to someone who welcomed exchange students into our home as well. When I lived in North America in California, we hosted foreign exchange students, and teaching my kids to do volunteer work and to give to others. And then when I lived in other countries, I lived in Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and now I'm living in Mexico, doing community service. In my hope, what I, as an employee at universities there, I considered myself a guest in the country, and then I needed to give back to my host country for all the things I was learning and appreciating, and the skills I was developing as a resident, a temporary resident in their countries.
Now, you were telling me that universities in the US, if people are interested in studying in university in the US, be they from the US or from other places, they're increasingly prioritizing applicants who demonstrate authentic commitment to community service and social impact. So these are things that should be done in junior high and high school, right? Or maybe even earlier, because they take this. Tell me a little bit about that, because that was not part of my experience of getting into university. All those many,
yes,
those were US universities for that.
That is something that has slowly evolved over time. The United States, one of its founding principles was to help others, and part of our tax system motivates people to do that. That if you make financial contributions to charities, you can deduct it from your taxes. And the government has always emphasized that community service, church, temple, synagogue, mosque related organizations are places that you can give money to help others, so that the burden isn't totally on the tax system of having to keep increasing taxes to provide services for people. That independent support is needed as well. And so as parents, it's good to start with elementary school children, cleaning parks or beaches, or when I gave my kids a little allowance of $1, I made them give like 20 cents to a charity. They had to put 20 cents in the bank, and they got to spend the other 60 cents. And then as they got older and their allowances got bigger, their contributions became better. And so that it becomes part of a person's ethos. You know how they say if you exercise for 2 weeks, the third week it will become a habit, and your body will crave it and you will want to do it. And so starting community service at the earliest possible age will help your child start recognizing and valuing the importance of it. And then in terms of college admission, yes, colleges, first they depend on the private colleges in particular, depend on the gifts and contributions of their alumni, of foundations, of wealthy people. The other part is they depend on a lot of volunteers to do work. Professional people to come in and give a talk on what do you do with a major in English? What does a lawyer really do? How difficult is it to get into medical school, and how do I prepare for it? And so they're looking for people who are not only going to help their college or university, but the bigger world outside, because that reflects well. When I tell people, I'm a graduate of Carleton College and of Washington University School of Law in St. Louis, people think, oh, those must be good schools because she turned out really well and she's been very successful. I should look at those schools. And and colleges do a lot to promote their students doing community service and their alumni doing community service, just not limited exclusively to the college. For example, helping feed students on financial aid during winter break, spring break, and summer break. They have to go home. At college, they had unlimited food and beverages. They had unlimited heat and hot water and opportunities to bathe. When they go home over break, they and their family and the siblings they left behind don't have those same luxuries. And college students have kind of led the movement in starting on-campus food banks for students to take things home to survive over the breaks or to help their families back at home. And so things that students and families can do when a student is in junior high and high school is think of a community service project, a passion project, where they take something they really, really love and they put it together with a problem in the world that they would like to solve. Dirty help people who, you can't solve it, but maybe you want to help people who don't have access to clean water in a specific country, or you want to help unhoused people in a specific country or in a specific part of the US. I had a student once who created an amazing organization called Challah for Hunger, where she grew up baking challah at the temple with her mother and raising money for her temple and for Israel. And she realized Israel and the temple weren't her passions. She was worried about the unhoused people who were starving in the streets and in her own backyard, not figuratively, in her own backyard. And so she started something called Challah for Hunger. And you didn't have to be Jewish to participate. She invited friends in high school over to her house to make bread. They sold the bread. They started taking orders for the bread. They grew the business. It helped them all get into great colleges and universities. She kept it going while she was in college and connected with the Jewish Student Union as a natural first connection, but opened it to students of all faiths and no faiths. Come bake bread with us. They got the university to let them use the industrial kitchen to bake their bread and sell it. And it grew so big that it became a legal not-for-profit, and then a bigger not-for-profit called Mason, M-A-Z-S-O-N, for those who want to look it up, or Google Challah for Hunger. And now there are chapters on over 20 or 30 college campuses across the United States, and they have raised over the last 20 years millions of dollars to help feed every type of homeless or unhoused or hungry person imaginable. Native Americans, veterans, single parents raising children on low incomes. So yes, doing community service is very important. My advice to students is minimum 50 hours per year, goal 250 or more. And people are shocked and say, did you just invent those numbers? We've never heard those numbers before. Where those numbers are derived from is an award that used to exist in the US called the Presidential Volunteer Service Award. And unfortunately, in February 2025, government cuts put that program on hold. And in that program, you could earn a bronze certificate. If you were 16 years old, you would get a bronze certificate for 100 hours of community service, a silver certificate for 175 hours, and a gold certificate for 250 hours. Not, the well-educated students from well-educated families, they knew about the program and they participated. And my mission, until it got stopped by the government, was to make certain more students knew about it to participate because it's free. And then fortunately, Realize the Dream has partnered with the Martin Luther King Foundation to continue that program. And so that's where those magical numbers of 50 and 250 come from. If you want to get into a really top elite school, try to do as many community service hours as possible. There's no such thing as too much, but set your goal at 250 hours a year. And if you don't reach your goal, that's okay. The important thing is that you try and you work toward it, and the joy and the peace and the satisfaction it will give you, in whether you raise $100 or $1,000 or $2,000. Every little bit counts. And that's something a college development officer taught me, because when I was young and started working at colleges and universities, I said to a development officer, I owe my college and my graduate school so much. I wish I had the money to donate. And they said, whoa, 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 stop. You don't have to give $5,000, $10,000. If you just give $5, $10, whatever you can spare, one of the measurements for colleges and universities is participation among its alumni in the giving process. So by you not giving even $1, you're hurting your college. If you can scrape together $5 a month and donate it, or $5 a year, and that will increase their participation by one more moment. And then if you carry that message to your classmates and your friends, that will help as well. Because I was the recipient of so many grants and scholarships for both college and graduate school that I will never be able to donate enough money to pay it back. Mm-hmm. But every little thing I can do to help my two alma maters, I will do. And I like to help other institutions as well. Historically Black, the tribal colleges. All of the colleges and universities need donations, need gifts, so that they can provide scholarship money to students and help change their futures. And it helps the country, because in my family, there were 7 kids. 6 of the 7 broke the welfare cycle and are not on welfare and have thriving families, and our children are not on welfare. Sadly, one of the 7 didn't make it. She became a mom at the age of 15 and had 3 kids by the time she was 25. And then her children grew up in dire circumstances, and now their children are growing up in dire circumstances. But 6 of the 7 of us broke the cycle. And so there are people who say, why should people get financial aid? I worked hard to pay the bills. Those other people should too. They didn't have the opportunity. They didn't have the knowledge. They didn't have the mentors. And these are all things that will help change any society in any part of the world. And one of my goals here in Oaxaca is to breed more of that idea of community service, because that's a newer concept in Mexico. It's a much older country, of course, than the United States. And so, teaching people in other countries the value of community service, and the not only the joy it brings the individual, but how it helps the country move forward as a whole by raising the levels of its poorest people.
I think in Oaxaca they have that at a very, very, very local level, that community service where everybody mucks in. But it might have been lost in the city. In Oaxaca City is probably less common now. No, it's been lost. Yeah, and certainly not at a national level. At a national level, it really gets lost. Yeah.
Yes. In the pueblos, like when someone gets married, everyone helps pay for the wedding,
right?
Or a 15-year-old birthday party. Somebody
or cleaning the pueblo as well, cleaning the streets.
Yes,
that
we call it tequio.
Yes.
But for the wealthier people and the upper middle class people, that has not been part of the education, the training, the ethos historically. It's growing, and people like Carlos Slim and Harpy Lou, they are doing they are the 2 wealthiest men in the country, and the kinds of things they work on. They built a baseball stadium in Oaxaca, Harpy Lou. And they are, Harpy Lou sponsors a free concert every Thursday night. And it breaks my heart when I go to the free concert, because it's all the foreigners. It's all the expat community.
Oh, really?
And one of my goals, my life the last year has had a lot of travel, but now that travel is going to slow down dramatically, one of my goals is to work with the head of the music program and find a way to reach more of the local people, and especially more of the economically disadvantaged local people who don't know there's a free concert every Thursday.
Yeah, I think it's that. I think it's they don't know that there's a concert, because I know where I live because I live in a small place as well. Those concerts fill up. You know, the Zocalo is full.
Oh, well, this free concert is inside of a textile museum, and it's limited capacity.
And it's hidden away a little bit.
The Americans and the Canadians are the first people in line to grab all the seats. And they look, there's an expression we use here in Oaxaca, I don't know if you use it where you live, called fifi, which is like she or chic in English. And they look like very fifi people. And so, for instance, our housekeeper doesn't feel comfortable going in her very plain traditional clothes to this concert filled with Americans and Canadians, some of whom are in very fifi outfits, because then they're going out to a nice dinner. And many museums and the ruins are free for Mexican citizens on Sundays. And many people don't know that, or they don't, the disadvantaged people don't know that, or they don't have transportation to get there. And so one of the things that we want to do is spread the word and find a way to fund transportation and to help parents see the value in taking their children. Because when you choose between, okay, we have Sunday free, do we work in the garden and plant more fruits and vegetables, or do we go visit ruins? We shouldn't have to make those choices. The child should be able to have, and the family should be able to have both experiences. And so we want to find ways to make it efficient and cost effective and easy, so that they can have the best of both experiences.
And experience their own country, you know?
Experience their own country.
I want to talk about power, because we've spoken about the not-for-profit sector and your work as a coach, as an admissions coach. What about the rough and tumble world of the corporate university? No, because that's a bit different. No, I mean, because you worked your way up. There are politics, office politics, I assume. Sometimes, no, it's very hierarchical. How did you navigate that? You know, especially given all the background that we've spoken about. You know, to have the confidence and it's interesting.
Well,
you know.
Well, I was very fortunate. My foster father George, who he and his wife Myrna were the Peace Corps volunteers, and they were both educated as high school teachers, but she was a stay-at-home mom initially. They saw something in me and pushed me into speech and debate. They said, you know, when she gets angry, she can shoot her mouth off and she can speak pretty strongly and directly and clearly. And so they pushed me into speech and debate in grade 7. And I started developing those verbal skills very early. So anything a young person can do to enhance their verbal skills is very important. And participating in experiences like speech and debate, Model UN, those are all very important. And then I learned to watch and learn from the people around me. For example, I won't say which family, but I looked at a set of my foster parents and I thought, they need a divorce, but they can't afford a divorce. And I thought, I'm never going to be in those shoes. I'm going to get a good education. I'm going to have a good job. I'm going to have a good income. So if I ever am married and I want or need a divorce, I am not constrained by finances. And I could look at the different families analytically and learn what were the good things they did and what were some of the unhealthy things they did. Like one of my mothers, in the era she was raised, you did not compliment the child directly. you would tell one child, oh, the other four are so wonderful and you should work harder. And it inadvertently pitted all the children against each other. And as the goody two shoes, straight A foster kid who never drank, smoked, or did drugs, some of my foster siblings resented hearing that I was the good kid. Well, what they didn't know was I was hearing they were the good kids. And I learned, okay, when you raise children, don't use that technique. It doesn't work. And then when I got into higher education, I learned to watch for the people who were most successful, the popular administrators that people wanted to work with, to have on committees. And I watched how they interacted in meetings. For example, I worked in, probably in this era, it's probably the same, in environments that were very sexist. A woman could share an idea and people would talk over her, and then a man would share the same idea and everybody would be that's brilliant. What a great job. And I saw this woman in a meeting at a board of trustees meeting, and she shared her idea and everyone was like, yeah, okay, next person. And then a man said the exact same thing about 10 minutes later. And everybody was like, that's brilliant. That's amazing. We need to jump on that idea immediately. And she very diplomatically took the reins and raised her hand and said, I'm glad that George came back to my idea and recognized the importance of when I shared with you all that I thought we should do A, B, and C. And so I learned to model myself after those people. I will confess, I'm a human being and I made my mistakes along the way, and I still make mistakes because, I was a vice president for over 30 years. I became one at the age of 28. It happened young and fast. My alma mater hired me and recruited me to be their first vice president and dean of students at Washington University's law school. And I had good mentors and good people. And then as I moved to other colleges and universities and saw inappropriate behavior that I didn't want to model, but I have put my foot in it a few times.
It happens. That's how we learn, no?
When under stress, and I was texting with someone, and I forgot, you can't hear tone of voice over text, and they don't know me to know that I'm warm and friendly and cuddly, and I'm just trying to solve a problem. They're hearing the text of an authoritative former vice president, former lawyer. And I had to go back and say, please no, I'm a driven type A perfectionist. My own children tell me that sometimes my words can be construed as too firm or too direct. And I'm sending these text messages only to help the situation, not to cast blame or hurt anyone. And so, this written culture is very important that we all adapt to, and that we're sensitive that you can't hear tone in emails and text messages, and that even though it may take an extra 5 minutes to say, hello, greetings, this is Debra, how are you? I need you to do A, B, C, and D. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your kindness in supporting me. That those niceties in writing are so important, because we don't get to use the tone of voice, the facial expression, and the eye contact to communicate the emotion that we're trying to send to the person. So if that's one thing I can share with older people, because we weren't raised with the technology that the young people have. And for the young people, be careful with your texts and take care of your friends or your teachers or your employers or your colleagues in the workplace, and be sensitive about how you write, because the written word can be so easily misconstrued.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And there's the intercultural element as well, no?
As well. And the intercultural element everywhere in the world.
Right.
There are expats and foreign people and migrants in every country in the world, in every workplace, in every high school, in every university. And, I sometimes make jokes that are very appropriate in North America. And my husband, who is Oaxacan, will take me aside and say, honey, we don't make jokes like that in Mexico. No, nobody, you need to steer away from that. That is not going to be understood as a joke. And I'm learning to be, because a joke breaks the ice. A joke lets people know you're not angry. If the housekeeper left a room really dusty, to be good-natured, make a joke about, oh, hey, this room is dusty, and throw in a little joke to let them know I'm not angry, I'm not upset. I just want you to focus on this a little more. And I need to know what kind of humor is appropriate,
right,
and what isn't. And it's not just me, the American in Oaxaca. It would be me, the person raised in North America, going to college at Carleton College, where, I had Mexican friends, Japanese friends, Chinese friends, and everyone's sense of humor. Or now I'm more sensitive to slang and idioms or colloquialisms, that to stop with my students and say, and also my age. I used to make jokes about, a diamond is a girl's best friend. And then I discovered the young people didn't know the song, and they didn't know what I was referring to. And to stop and say, does your age group understand this? Because they're very shy to say, I don't have a clue about what that means. Work as hard as a dog. Why is she saying that to me? What have I done to offend her? So the visuals are very important. I watch my students' faces, their reactions. If their eyes glaze over, to stop and say, do you know what that means? Do you use that expression in your country? What's the right expression for your country? So that I'm learning from them as well as they are learning from me, so that they will be successful as they enter more intercultural, multicultural environments.
So would you say that your communication skills have maybe been possibly one of the most important things in navigating this corporate university structure, and that's something that if we want to be successful in a corporate structure, that we need to work on?
Yes, because we talk every day, all day, in multiple different settings with different contexts. And being sensitive to your tone of voice, your eye contact, your role in the situation, and where the boundaries are is incredibly important. And how you treat your employees, how you treat your supervisors or the owner of the company is very important to a person's success. And so I would encourage people to take every advantage. Coursera and TED Talks both offer free online communication and verbal skills courses, joining speech and debate, Model UN, doing, when you're in college and university, the career services, or what they used to call the placement office, will do mock interviews with students.
Right.
In courses, in business courses, in science courses, it's very important to do PowerPoint presentations and be able to present in front of a group and know who your audience is and at what level you need to talk to them, and how to visually display what you're trying to communicate, because some of us are very visual learners. So I can't emphasize enough, thank you for raising the point, the value and importance of both verbal, primarily verbal, and written skills, because we're talking all day, every day, to our parents, to our children, to our friends, to our employers, to our clients, job interviews.
It's interesting that you mention having that sensitivity, the importance of listening skills, of actively listening, and that's an important part of communication too, right? Which we often forget about.
An incredibly important part. When I was a trial attorney, we once had an incredibly boring trial. It was all papers, all contracts, and we are talking mountains of papers. They were on my desk in the courtroom, and I could barely see the jury over the top of the papers because we had to be able to move them and pull them fast. And the other attorney was presenting their work, and 2 jurors were fast asleep in the court, just back with their mouth open. It was horrible. And the lawyer stopped and he said to the judge, jurors, 11 and 12 are fast asleep. Could you ask the bailiff to wake them up, please? And the judge had the best reply. He looked at him and said, no, you put them to sleep. You figure out how you're going to wake them up. Words that have stuck with me for over 30 years. You put them to sleep. You figure out how you're going to wake them up.
It takes 2 to tango.
It does. It does.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Deborah. We have we want to do more of these. I know that we've decided to do more of these. So we'll for those of you who are interested in this, have been interested in this conversation, watch this space. I think the topic for our next podcast is AI making us dumber? We have to finalize our topic for the next time. We want to dive, I think, into the impact of artificial intelligence on critical thinking. But let's watch this space. We'll confirm.
But before we sign off, you gave a teaser at the beginning, but you didn't come back to it. So I'm going to take advantage of this moment. He had mentioned that I was a canoeist. And I just
yes, exactly.
To share, we may talk about this. We may choose it as a topic someday.
Yes,
but
exactly.
In 1976, I was 16 years old. You can do the math. And I participated in the first women's canoe trip where we went. There were 9 women in a 26-foot Voyager canoe. And we went from northern Minnesota in the Boundary Waters canoe area to the headwaters of the Churchill and traveled over 1,200 miles in a 3-month period. And this year is our 50th anniversary, and all of us are still alive and we're still friends. And we're going to have a reunion in August. But it was an amazing experience, and that's why canoeing came up at the beginning of the introduction. But so I wanted to just circle back to that because it's such an exciting year for us.
It came up because in the chit chat before we went live, you mentioned it, and I was, oh wow, a 12,000-mile canoe journey. That's
1,200.
1,200. Yes. Okay, 1,200, but even still, no.
Yes, 12,000 would be a lot of miles. 1,200 was a lot.
Yeah.
And we were weather beaten. We had storms. We had vandals. We had threatening males and threatening bears. But we came home unscathed, stronger and more powerful people because of it. And it would be a good topic because it was a social science experiment where they took like 2 good kids, 2 mediocre kids, 2 kids with rougher circumstances, and put us all together for 3 months. One of the guides was a social worker, and it was to help us grow and appreciate each other and appreciate each other's differences and motivate us to lead better, stronger lives and empower us. Oh,
wow. Well,
it was amazing.
That's definitely something that we need to talk about. We can maybe even relate it to teamwork, how to work in a team. So let's finish up. I'm aware of the time. I please do feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat. Deborah and I will be on the lookout for any questions, especially if you would like to ask Deborah specifically about how to navigate situations like this. If you have a personal situation, I'm sure Debra would, of course, is going to be open to contacting you personally. And just, we would love to know which part of Debra's story resonated most with you. So please feel free to share your experiences or questions in the chat. Well, thank you very much. Have a marvelous Saturday, everyone. It is now Saturday. It is officially the weekend. And Debra, thank you so much.
Oh, it was a wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
I had a great time. And we'll talk on Tuesday, as we always do, our Tuesday morning meeting. Take care.
Wonderful.
Have a great weekend,
Take care,
everybody.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.